You know, I think we're kind of getting to the point where our understanding of what is wrong is reaching a critical mass, right? Cause I'll be honest with you, all right. Like I've been kind of hanging around like a lot of places and talking to a lot of people, and everybody's kind of getting to the same point where you hear Gen Z go, "I don't want to work a 94." Is this all we're supposed to do? With just work and be taxed and just try to survive? Is that the only thing we're made to do? Is that it? And everybody goes like, "You're not wrong." Right? Like these conservative like pundits are putting up these things. There's this guy, I forget his fucking name. I don't know what it is. His YouTube shorts. He's trash. Right? Again, fuck pundits. Just trash pundits, right? Having this understanding of looking at things and going, is this all we're supposed to be? Is that all we're judged on? Are we just a number? I saw an article yesterday that said, I think it was in my Discord. I think Art might have posted or Cappy, one of the two. I don't remember. I forget who put it up, but thank you for whoever did that. Um, they basically said the the education people said that the parents are just vessels to bring about like the future generation that they need. I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist, right? I don't like government. I don't like authority as an in general thing. But I'll be honest with you, okay? I'm a pragmatist. In the end of the day, right? I'm a Machiavellian. My mental is this: I would much rather like be a passenger in a car going someplace I'd like to go than drive to someplace I don't want to be. I'm gonna keep this all the way 100, right? Like I don't like riding. You know what I mean? I don't like having to stand here and like having to be like drugged someplace I don't want to go. I don't like having to tell my children that the only thing that they're going to be good for is production for somebody else, or even then serving the needs of other people. And this Economics Explained video really gets into the liberal mindset of who these people are and what they think of like the regular human beings who inhabit, this planet and shit. Just keeping it all the way 100% honest, you know? Like I'm standing here and like I'm watching this video and I'm just disgusted. Not because like they're talking about Rome, right? It's not about that in any way. It's just the way that they're talking about regular people. Let's watch this, man. I think you'll catch the drift real quick.
People constantly think of Rome, and by the numbers alone, it's hard to see why. Rome was not the largest empire to ever exist, it also wasn't the oldest, longest lasting, most globally dominant, or even the most innovative. Even still, the influence of this loosely defined region and time period is still felt in our own modern economies hundreds of years later. Now, a lot of that may be down to chance. Rome mostly dominated Europe and was gradually replaced by nation-states that in one form or another still exist today, nations that in turn became globally dominant in their own right through colonialism and industrialisation, or played a part in establishing what would go on to be the USA, which is the most economically dominant country in history. The USA, whether it would like to admit it or not, took a lot of lessons from the European nations that established a Western presence there, and those European nations took a lot of lessons as breakaway states of the Roman Empire, which it must be recognised took a lot of lessons from the empires that came before it. There is a reason that the White House and the US Capitol building, arguably the symbols of political power and the most powerful country in the world, look awfully familiar to architecture from 3,000 years ago. The point is, being dominant in a region that would go on to be even more dominant is a great way to get an empire's history remembered over others that are in many ways arguably far more remarkable. But that's an argument for actual historians or architects. The reason we're here, of course, is to explore the economic legacy that this line of historical hand-me-downs has had on our modern world, as even though economists can't predict the future, there are still a lot of concerning lessons to be learnt from the past. Despite just being really
let's keep this all the way 100 here. All right. The reason why the Roman Empire is remembered the way it is, right, has not a lot to do with numbers, right? And this is why, like, people who are liberal or study, like, economics as a whole don't really have the capacity to understand what the importance of these places are. It's not chance. It's culture. There's this stuff, right? And this is where, like, liberalism fails miserably, right? At almost everything it does is because it doesn't understand culture, right? Liberalism will be defeated by nationalism because culture will always defeat economics, right? Because, like, people, as an in general thing, exist. Human beings need a baseline of who they are as human beings, right? Man, listen, is this like, I don't know. Oh, it was. Right? Like, human beings need, like, a baseline for what human beings do. They need to be able to stand here and have something that is more important than themselves. It's not that difficult to understand, right? They have families, they have communities, they have all this stuff that, like, kind of matters, right? That's real, it's tangible, right? And those connections and the way they interact with those connections, the way they interact with the world around them is their culture, right? It's about what you do all day. What's economics is about what people do all day, right? But your culture, you know what I'm saying, is something that's worth fighting and dying for. And when you lose that culture, you end up unstable because then all you have is economics to lean on. And those economics that you had to lean on, if they're not really working for you anymore, like, you no longer have family, you no longer have, like, all the stuff that, like, makes life worth living, and economics takes a turn. Things get nasty real quick. And that's where we are today. And Rome gave you culture, real culture. Not like dumbass nonsense of, cheeseburgers and macaroni and cheese, right? Though macaroni, It gave people, like, actual ideologies and philosophy and art that mattered, right? That was bigger than things. In the end of the day, long lasting. It's a sense of pride, sense of self-respect. They fought for families, honored your traditions, your heritage, your ancestors. These things, right? These are big things to human beings. And I know, like, economists are like, oh, they're just all by chance. Liberals are like, it's by chance that you're born to this family. Yeah, but you were. Just carry that shit with pride, long term. It is what it is. Let's keep rocking.
Interesting. Ancient Rome as an economic case study can reveal a lot about a lot of our modern world and also add the perspective that despite its incredible power and influence that has literally rippled through time, even at its peak, it was probably only comparable in wealth and industrial might to countries like Uganda, Bolivia, or Nepal, and even that might be optimistic. So, what is it that made the Roman economy so influential on our modern economic systems? What can it teach economists about the fundamentally limited nature of limitless growth? And finally, if our own economies have borrowed so much from this ancient empire, are we doomed to repeat the same mistakes? Once we've done all of that, we can put ancient Rome on the Economics Explained leaderboard. Yes, we've heard you and we got rid of the word national so that we can have a bit more fun with it in the new year. If you're a bit of a scatterbrain like me, you might have hundreds of browser tabs open at a time and it can feel just very disorganised. That's why I was so glad I discovered the Opera browser, who we've partnered with for this video. Talking about the economy of Rome without specifying a time period is like talking about the economy of the USA without specifying if it's the USA post-Civil War or the USA post.com bubble. The Roman Empire in one form or another lasted almost 2,000 years up until as late as the 1800s, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll be looking at the time period of around 100 to 200 AD, the height of the empire, at least from a territorial perspective. Now, with that out of the way, it might not even matter, because whatever year is selected, the economy of Rome was kind of pathetic, at least by today's standards. Now, that might...
Alright, let me say this, right? The average American up until 1900 was living on $1 a day. And the period of, like, the Wild West settlement, like the Western expansion and Manifest Destiny, these are like the idea of American as a cowboy, right? Like all that type of shit. That is fundamental to the core nature of what like Americans see themselves as and who we are. Like the limitless fucking opportunity, right? The massive expansion, the opportunity to take a risk and become like successful. That's what, you know what I mean, like America is founded on. And that's where these principles come from. Just so we have that fucking clear. $1 a day. All right, let's keep this rocking.
Might sound hard to believe since the Empire is normally depicted as an all-powerful force that dominated its area of the world and created splendorous wealth, at least for its elite citizens. But the reality is that it was mostly an agrarian state with very little industry, and its economy reflected that. Working out the total economic output of a country, even today with the benefit of modern record-keeping standards and large international organisations that commit to doing the research they need to come up with these numbers, is hard enough. Working out the GDP of a 2,000-year-old empire that kept comparatively few records and had no independent oversight based on decayed relics is another challenge entirely. But Raymond W. Goldsmith, who was a legendary economist and historian, made about the best attempt that any economist has ever been able to. He estimated that the Roman Empire had a GDP per capita of around the equivalent of $1,000 to $1,277 in today's money, which would make it a desperately poor economy, well below the global average today, with most of its people living in absolute poverty.
Okay, let's address this, right? Because this is kind of important in the end of the day. $1,000 to $1,200 a day, right, is $3 a fucking day, right, per citizen. That is absolutely, and that's 365 days a year. That is not bad, right, for an economy 2,000 fucking years ago, where literally, like, yo, your basic premise of what you're adding to the economy is a fucking excess harvest with basic hand tools. Are you fucking out of your mind? That is not bad at all. In any way, like, let's keep it 100. Like, if you were a farmer, right, and your job every year was to stand here and feed your family and then sell the excess back to your community, like you were Amish or something, this is still good fucking numbers today, right? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Fucking, like, it's absolute poverty. Like, that is not bad. 1,200 extra dollars. Like, are you, again, Americans were living on $1 a day in 1900. Are you fucking serious right now? Like, up until like the 1980s and 90s, there was like 4 billion people or 3 billion people on the planet who were living on $1 a day. Like, that's not absolute fucking poverty. That's just, you know, being an agrarian person. Like, oh, you're not producing economic fucking growth. And that's not a bad fucking thing. At the end of the day, like, yo, what? Let's keep going, bro. We'll keep going.
Collectively, that is a total economic output of around 50 to 60 billion US dollars, which would also make it a very small economy. GDP, or gross domestic product, is a measurement of how much stuff an economy produces for itself in a given year, but there are two general ways to calculate this number, from the production side or from the consumption side. Theoretically, it is possible to measure GDP by taking records of every single final good or service that rolls off a production line, gets constructed, or is performed by a worker in an economy. The problem, of course, is that this would be incredibly difficult to do accurately, because it would involve having a record taken of all of these different events, which happens millions of times a day in any given country around the world. If a nation really did try to measure its economic activity this way, then a large part of its economic activity would just be measuring its economic activity, not really a great outcome, all things considered. That's why in the real world, the way that most output figures get measured is by using demand rather than supply. If something of value is made in an economy, it will be demanded by some economic participant. Even things that are made and not immediately sold are counted as an investment made by a business, because in the end the hope would be that those goods could be sold to a consumer, which means that while they're waiting to be sold they count as inventory, which is an asset. If something is produced and not demanded by anyone at any price, then it has no value and the production of that good shouldn't have been counted anyway. Total demand, or aggregate demand as some economists will say, is far easier to measure because every time anybody in a modern advanced economy purchases something, legally at least, there is a record kept for taxation and accounting reasons. Those records can be easily collected by economists and used to construct economic metrics like GDP. Now, of course, Raymond W. Goldsmith and the other economists that came after him attempting to calculate the GDP, or total economic output, or aggregate demand of the Roman Empire, didn't have these data points available to them, but they could still use the same basic techniques. By looking at how much wheat was consumed by the average Roman citizen according to records, they could piece together output figures for other produced goods like foodstuffs, construction projects, and natural resource extraction. They could also look at this from the production side by measuring the average gold mine in the empire and working out how much output that equated to in simple adjusted economic terms. The result was that most Romans lived hand to mouth, and wealth was determined primarily by how good the harvest was that year. By global standards at the time, Romans enjoyed a higher quality of life than most people thanks to some investments into infrastructure and some surprising agricultural technologies, but by modern standards, even the elites would live far poorer lives than anybody lucky enough to be alive watching this video. This relative poverty leads to an interesting rabbit hole of questions that truly demonstrates just how much of a miracle our modern world really is. So, to begin with, why was the ancient world so poor? To produce economic output, an economy needs the factors of production: land, labour, and capital. We mentioned this a lot, so I don't.
All right, let's talk about this, right? So the reason why our modern economic world exists, right? The reason why our modern world exists the way it does is because we are all forced into a fucking system at birth. Right, like everybody at birth is given a birth certificate and a social security card, right? And like, you're forced to go to school for 13 fucking years and then probably another 4 afterwards if you want to get a really good job, right? If you're told that you want to get a really good job, right? Because I'll be honest with you, you could be a plumber and not do those 4 years of fucking school. You know what I mean? And make way more than most college graduates in the end of the day, right? And literally what ends up happening is with everybody being forced into this fucking system through taxation of like your property and taxation of like, you know, your basic life and all the other things that go with it, right? What ends up happening is you end up in this repeated cycle where you can't get the fuck out. No matter how hard you try, you're never going to be able to escape the fucking system. And this forces everybody to continue to be productive repeatedly forever, right? And it never stops, and just never, you'll never end up being, you know what I mean, anything more than a fucking productive unit in this fucking economy. And that's what this is, right? That's not the fact that the modern world is, you know what I mean, some fucking miracle, right? It's the fact that literally they enslaved the entire global fucking population to make them work for goddamn fucking the ability to continue to have fucking wealth for the state. That's it. All this is the fact that like literally the British and the French invented the state because they were scared of the Ottomans and the goddamn fucking they wanted to be able to conquer everybody in their fucking region, which forced everybody else to have fucking states and then ended up making everybody be beholden to these fucking state bureaucracies. That's literally what happened during the fucking Renaissance and the Enlightenment. And ended up leading us to where we are today. There is literally nothing more to it. Our people were enslaved like fucking 400 or 500 years ago, and we're still here today. Right? This isn't Marxism, this isn't communism, it just is what it is. Right? Because honestly, like real shit, how many of y'all watching this video would rather not have to go to fucking work every day and would rather be able to like grow your own food in a community and go fishing and just like be part of a family and a unit? I'm betting the vast majority of you. Keeping it 100. Like, we have all these negative views about family and community and rules and all this stuff today because of the fact that like it doesn't make any sense in our modern economy to be able to be this way, right? So like if you didn't have to go to school, you didn't have like all this industry, you didn't have all these things to go do, right? Being in a community where like they just said, listen, you're part of this community, we worship God here, you know what I mean, you follow these fucking rules, you know what I mean, you don't be a homosexual, you know what I mean, you don't stand here and act like a fucking asshole towards everybody, you'll be just fine. You'll have a wife and children, you know what I mean, that fucking farm, and you'll work and you'll, you know what I mean, be part of a bigger fucking thing other than yourself. That makes more sense in an agrarian society. Reality of things. And I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think the vast majority of problems domestically that we have inside of our households, inside of like all the problems of like abuse and fucking, you know what I mean, like spousal problems and just all that shit, I think that literally is the fact of like our world has changed more over the past 150 years than it has in the past fucking 5 million. Keeping it a buck. And we don't have a way of like dealing with that socially, right? Our best solution is to medicate and drug people and force them into being compliant. And that's not the way you're supposed to be as a human. It's literally, a human being wasn't made to live in the way that we live today. It wasn't, you're not made to like sit inside of a fucking box for, you know what I mean, 13 years for 7 hours a fucking day. You're just not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to be made to work for 40 years inside of a fucking cubicle. You're not supposed to be made to do that. You're supposed to be outside in the sunshine, eating food that you grew naturally. Being around people who love and cherish you. When you're born, the people around you are supposed to celebrate your birth. It's the whole point of a birthday. It has nothing to do with you. They made it that way today because of consumption. We adopted old tactics into our new way of thinking. You were brought gifts because the community wanted to know you were cherished, and they look forward to you being an adult and you being part of them. That was the whole point of all of this. And that got lost somewhere around the fucking line. I don't know where. I'm betting around 1900 when these motherfuckers started appearing. These fucking managers. These people who their entire means of earning a living is governance. They're educated in governance. They're not supposed to exist. They're not supposed to have a hold on you. At no point in any empire, Rome, Ottoman, whatever, would they ever have a say about how you fucking lived inside of your family and your community. The Romans would never stand here and dictate how your community fucking acted. They would never dictate like the basic social values of your community. They wouldn't uphold the social values of your community. That was on y'all. The only thing Romans cared is that your tribute was paid. And that's it. Nothing more. As long as you didn't stand there and fuck over their merchants, they didn't give a shit what you did. You know, look, I'll be honest with you. And fuck economics explained for the moment. Fuck liberalism. Fuck the Enlightenment. Fuck industry. Look, yo. Tom Pease of Pnoid News, man. I'm up out of here. Later, partner.